Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our webinar. Thank you for joining us and for allowing us an opportunity to bring some insight into this very interesting topic. We've had a phenomenal response, so we are grateful, and we hope that we can give you some tools today to help you become more influential being in HR. Just by way of introduction, I am Rose Govender. I'm the General Manager and a Specialist Recruiter at Pro Talent Recruitment, specializing in finance and technical. I've got about 8 years experience in recruitment, and before that, I worked in HR for 10 years as a generalist stroke manager. That type of introduction makes me feel quite old, but I'm not. And I think what qualifies me to speak a little bit today is the fact that I've been in HR. I've sat in a lot of the chairs that you all are sitting in, and I also deal with HR managers on a daily basis and have to hear their pain points. So I think I can share a little bit of insight from there. I moved into talent 8 years ago, talent acquisition, and have never looked back. So I have a deep respect for all of the HR people that are sitting and listening to us today. And I think I'd like this to be as interactive as possible, within reason, because I think we also can all learn from each other as well. So, without further ado, I do want to introduce everyone to Melanie, who's going to be our speaker today. Melanie, a funny story, Melanie worked at Pro Talent for a bit as one of our recruiters, but she's always ever been in HR and is very well qualified to speak on this topic. So just a little bit about Melanie. She's been in HR and organizational development for the last 20 years. She holds an honors degree in industrial psychology. And what's good about her is she combines academic knowledge with practical experience because she's been an HR manager for many years. She's also received coaching in neuroscience, which equips her with unique insights into human behavior and performance. Melanie currently runs or owns the Waymakers, which is a company that provides HR services to help clients to navigate through today's workforce. In addition to consulting, she's also an HR coach, and she coaches leaders and empowers them to realize their full potential. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Melanie.
Thank you, Rose. And such an honor to collaborate with Rose and Pro Talent today. We are very excited about this topic, and I know that Rose is going to bring a lot of value to the conversation as well. And we're looking forward to interacting with all of you as well. So I am going to share my screen with you all. I would say, as you have questions, perhaps pop them into the chat. We'll definitely have a Q&A session at the end. And choosing the right window here, we'll have a look at all your questions. So, hoping that you can all see my screen. You should see a lot of pink. After 7 years, I've decided to add pink to the branding colors for the Waymakers, just because we can. So today, imposter syndrome in HR. This is not going to be a confidence talk. So I'm not here to boost your confidence and to motivate you today. That's not quite the angle we're taking when talking about imposter syndrome. We are definitely going to get to talking about the inner work of overcoming our self-doubt. And we're also certainly going to spend a bit of time focusing on the things that HR can do sometimes that don't do ourselves any favors. And what are those behaviors, and how can we, we're fitting, shift how we conduct ourselves, how we communicate to increase our influence and to increase our credibility within the organization, and to give ourselves more of an authoritative voice at the leadership table. So we're going to discuss those things. But first, perhaps a little bit of something out of left field, what you might not have expected to hear about in this talk today. I want to talk about something called structural authority. So HR shift from self-doubt to structural authority. So we're going to make a little shift and take our thoughts about imposter syndrome away from an internal focus to how can we establish authority for the HR function in the structures that are around us, and lead the HR function from a position of having authority that's not coming from the tone of our voice or our behavior, but that actually comes from the way that HR is positioned within the organization. So let's dive in. So the problem, I don't know if you can all see all the little screens that are on my screen, but there we go. I had all kinds of things going on here. So the problem, imposter syndrome, in any article that you read on imposter syndrome, we know it's not about competence. In fact, often the most competent and talented among us suffer the most with imposter syndrome somehow. I don't know whether it's because we know how it should be done and we have all the information and we're judging ourselves and judging where we fall short, but it's not about competence. I want to say to you that a large reason why HR people in particular suffer with imposter syndrome is because of the structures, it's because of the environment that we find ourselves, because of situational factors. And so that self-doubt is a rational response to ambiguous systems, and we're going to dive into those a bit more. Misaligned expectations. I'm sure that we've all experienced that we have an expectation based on our functional knowledge of our role, of what we should be doing and how we should be doing it. The employees have their expectation of what HR should be doing, and management have their expectation. And often those three things look different and they're misaligned. And so we are conscious of falling short of all these expectations. And then there comes the isolation. And this, I think, applies to some degree more if you're working for a SMME and you're a sole HR practitioner. This problem is amplified, where you don't have a peer to bounce ideas off of. The problems that you're carrying are confidential, so you can't just speak to somebody and get a viewpoint. The load that you're carrying is sometimes something that only you know, and so that operating in isolation also exacerbates the sense of self-doubt. So all of these are things that you don't have control of. So what I'd like you to do is, if you're feeling any sense of shame about lacking confidence or suffering from imposter syndrome, take that right now and shed it. We're not taking it with us into this conversation. I want to read to you. I put a long wordy paragraph, as I tend to be quite wordy, into ChatGPT and asked ChatGPT to succinctly frame the problem that I put to ChatGPT. And these were the phrases that came through. And I thought I'd share these because I know that you're going to be nodding your head and agreeing. So the answer to my problem was, HR is asked to deliver outcomes without shared expectations. HR is responsible for people outcomes, but excluded from real decisions. HR is navigating ambiguity created by leaders who expect expertise they don't fully understand. And HR is caught serving two masters, human values and commercial pressure. HR is expected to be strategic while being treated as operational. HR is expected to deliver culture, but not empowered to shape it. HR is navigating ambiguity in systems that no longer support their ability to shape culture and deliver commercial outcomes. So I don't know if you want to put a show of hands, a thumbs up, if any of that resonated with you. But this was my list on the screen. The ambiguous expectations, as I said, different people having conflicting expectations of what HR should be doing. and I say HR in inverted commas because my pet peeve is that the HR department is the only one, or if you're one HR person, it's the only place where you're not known by your name. You're known as HR. And that always used to irritate me, the depersonalization of HR. But yeah, your high accountability, sometimes with low authority. You're carrying a load, really, really weighty issues that you're carrying, and it's confidential, so you cannot share it with anybody. The fact that you know you're being evaluated by people who are not subject matter experts, the role overload, in between your employment equity submissions and the payroll budget for next year, can you organize goodie bags for the year-end function? Just the absolute overload. And then, of course, comparison culture are all factors that result in us feeling like an imposter, result in us doubting ourselves. So, in terms of the environmental aspect, in terms of the structural piece, I want to put to you that for HR specifically, we can redefine imposter syndrome as being driven by three things. Firstly, structural, this lack of clarity of the mandate, lack of clarity in terms of what decisions am I authorized to take and what precisely is my scope. Because, and I'm generalizing here, there is a tendency among us in HR to take on whatever is thrown at us because we want to please everybody and we want to perform. And so the scope becomes this broad, not very well-defined thing. And then there's a relational aspect, as I said, that's operating in isolation, lacking a sparring partner, somebody that you can bounce an idea of, particularly if you're a lone HR practitioner in a small to medium-sized enterprise. And then finally, psychological. I have a theory, and you can decide whether you agree or not, but I think there's a particular behavioral style of person that typically ends up in HR where we are idealistic. We're fighting for this utopia. We're wanting perfection. We're wanting to achieve, shoot the lights out. We're highly responsible. We take responsible for things that people want to put on us. We maybe just accept that responsibility. So we've got this high sense of achievement, this high sense of responsibility, but possibly in terms of the feedback that the HR function specifically gets, might not be quite what we're needing in terms of the level of encouragement, the level of direction that we're needing, the level of feedback that we're needing, maybe lacking. And all of that is driving this. Am I doing okay? I'm not too sure what am I meant to be doing. Am I meeting expectations because of the lack of clarity? So we need to make a shift. We need to make a shift from internalizing the problem to some extent and recognizing that this is a need for authority that doesn't come from our personality, that authority that doesn't come from our tone of voice, authority that comes from the structure of how HR is positioned in the business. So to do that, there's some shifts we need to make. So we need to shift from this approval seeking, really not wanting to let anybody down, to being clear on this is my mandate and I will focus on achieving that. I'm not going to try and be all things to all people. I'm not going to accept responsibility for whatever people want to put onto me as HR. And so that leads us to shift two, where I'm shifting from this over responsibility to, from a basis of being clear on my mandate, these are the boundaries that I'm able to function within, and being intentional about that daily. And then the third shift that I think we really need to make for those that do feel that they are in isolation is building a network of peers, having somebody that you can go to for mentorship and for guidance, so that you don't have that isolation that exacerbates your self-doubt because you've got no one to check your gut feel with. So why is this all important? We know and a lot of businesses are catching up, that HR can no longer be administrative support. We've got to be the commercial infrastructure, part of the commercial infrastructure in the business. And we will never overcome imposter syndrome by focusing on, I've got to be more confident, I've got to believe in myself. Why am I doubting myself so much? If we don't address the structural clarity that is often lacking around the HR function. I think I can see something in the chat. I'm just going to stop and say hello. Yes, very true. We often find ourselves where there is no safe space. Absolutely. And it's rare to the HR function. And I don't think that people land in HR. I don't think there's a correlation between people who have a high propensity to imposter syndrome and people who land in HR. It's a bit of a chicken and egg thing. I think that the space that we find ourselves in lends itself towards, suffering with imposter syndrome. So, as Rose says, 20 years in HR, various organizations where I've either been part of a corporate HR structure or the sole HR practitioner or the sole country HR practitioner in a global organization. My experience is that to some degree, these challenges have been common across all. So the HR authority triad, and again, I used the AR function in Canva. I'm of a generation and an age where I'm very proud of myself whenever I use AR. But the T in authority didn't come through clearly, and we'll blame the AR for that. But I asked Canva to create this for me, and this is what I got. So this model says that authority needs somewhere to land. And again, we build authority to some extent by our knowledge, absolutely, and with our credibility. But within the business, for us to truly lead the HR function and have the authority to lead conversations when it comes to the people factor in the business, that authority needs to rest on these three things. It needs to rest on the clarity, the commercial alignment, and containment. Where those are in place, there's somewhere for the authority to rest, and I say HR then can carry authority. Where we don't have these things, we make room for doubt. And let's drill down more specifically. What are they? Clarity means a defined mandate, clarity of the mandate, clarity in what decisions I can take, and clarity on what can rightfully be expected of HR. What should we be expecting of HR, no matter where we sit in the organization? Then the containment refers to that safe space, your circle, a place where you can go and spar, have a sparring partner with somebody who has the same subject matter expertise or more subject matter expertise as you, somewhere where you can share your emotional load. So creating that space to deal with the problem of isolation in HR. And then the commercial alignment. Having inputs, having sight to the business objectives, the business strategy, so that you can ensure that your HR endeavors are aligned to support the business. Because when you're using that language and you're coming from that angle, it also increases your authority in the business. So how are we doing? You're all still with me? So that model really, and it'll be on the PDF that I'm going to share after the session, sums up what needs to exist from an organizational perspective to combat our sense as HR of failing, to combat the self-doubt, to combat the sense of, I don't think I'm meeting expectations. Those are the structural elements. But definitely when it comes to imposter syndrome, there's also an internal element. So I want us to consider a little bit about the inner work and the inner journey to moving from a sense of possibly being a bit invisible in the organization to being influential in the organization. And so we borrow a bit from neuroscience here. The first thing we want to ditch is the fake it till you make it slogan. We're not faking anything in HR, but what we might be doing is practicing confidence while we're still learning. And that speaks more to the growth mindset. It acknowledges, in HR, we're always engaging in professional development. It's just an ever-evolving field, and it's such a broad field as well. You're going to have your strengths, and you're going to have your areas where you're learning. And so it's okay to be practicing while I'm still learning. That mindset and that reframing can help us to combat the imposter syndrome. Linked to that is to practice radical acceptance, people. In HR, we all know there are so many things that are frustrating us at different levels and the different areas of the business. There's opportunity to be frustrated. Radical acceptance is going to help you. How's it go? Lord, help me to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and crucially, wisdom to know the difference. What can you not control? And let it go. Again, to fight that tendency to take responsibility for everything. Some of the things we worry about are not our responsibility. So to practice, to accept it. It is what it is. And let's focus on gearing up the courage to change the things we can. Then building our psychological resilience. Neuroscience says that the most effective tool is handwriting in a journal. If you don't have time for that, at least, voice record your thoughts, but take time to reflect and to reframe. Neuroscience says if you imagine your thoughts as little sparks that start in your brain and go through your nervous system, through your whole body, and those little sparks are running around your body, and it starts with your thoughts, and those thoughts are going through your whole physical body all day, every day, and it's having all kinds of impacts on us. So we can build resilience by taking charge of those thoughts. Journal your wins from you finally had that difficult conversation that you've been putting off to, we won that case at the CCMA, whatever it may be. Journal your wins and then keep your vision clear. Write it down. Have it in front of you. It's so important because that's going to be your rudder. We know that in HR, the ups and downs, and more downs than ups sometimes, and it's a stormy sea. And you're going to be tossed to and fro, and that imposter syndrome is going to have a fertile ground if you're not very clear on overall vision, weekly goals, where am I going? Keep that your main thing, the main thing. And then, again, build your container. Don't do this alone. And so at the end as well, I'm going to tell you about the Waymakers HR for HR community, which intends to be a place where you can build your container, where you can find peers, you can find subject matter experts, and a safe space to get the support that you need. And while I was talking through that slide, I think that I have been talking for quite a while. Rose, I'm sure you've got something to add to our conversation. What are your thoughts?
I love how you're saying that, it's so important to have a support system. And I think when I was in HR, let's face it, HR is a very lonely position to be in a lot of companies. If you think about most structures, usually you have one HR person and they have to do everything. Or if you're part of a team in HR, everyone's got a different function. So it can often feel very lonely. On top of that, like I've got a lot of clients that are in HR that are HR managers or practitioners that I'm dealing with. And often it's shared with me that they feel undervalued, they feel unseen, they feel overworked, underpaid. Let's not even go there. But I think I've often seen, and I've seen it with myself because I was an HR manager for 6 to 8 years, and I often find that management or the executives, they forget the framework in which you're supposed to work. They forget what your role entails, and it just becomes HR is responsible for everything. Everything under the sun that we can slip into HR becomes HR's responsibility. So I think the starting point is the acknowledgement that we need to create boundaries in terms of what is my function and what isn't. And for the what isn't, most of the time, from what I can see, it needs to go back to line. So, example, somebody comes to HR and they've got a complaint. We're so inclined to listen to that complaint because we care, and HR people usually come from a psychology background and people, and everybody wants to help everybody, and that's fine, but it's at the cost of your, let's say, mental health sometimes.
Yeah.
So if everyone's coming to the complaints department to complain, then the managers get away with their responsibility, which is to manage and lead their teams. So I think sometimes it's besides our own insecurities that we deal with. Sometimes it's about creating those boundaries and about knowing what to back because it doesn't fall within my area of responsibility at this point in time. But I think, and that's just from what you've been saying. I'm obviously not the psychologist that Mel is, and I think for me, I often talk from a point of experience and just practical tips and that sort of thing. So I don't think I'm as structured in terms of the tips that I'm going to give you as she is, but I think for me, I've learned when you attend a webinar or a talk, you must take from it what you can use. It's not always everything. It's sometimes one or two things that would be a game changer for you. So I think just from whatever I've shared or I'm going to be sharing, take what works for you, ignore the rest. Something's going to work for some people and other things are going to work for others. And I think the starting point for me, and from what I've seen, both in HR and now as I sit as a recruitment specialist, is there's quite a lack of knowledge when it comes to dealing with HR. And I think we can all say, we've got so much on our plates and there's a million things to do in a day. And I sat in that chair and I think the thing that I struggled with is you're busy with a disciplinary hearing, and then you've got interviews later in the day, and you're busy with your WSP, and then you've got a restructure discussion in another department. So it's very diverse, your role. But I often find that if we do the next thing that I'm going to recommend, sometimes we can halve that workload just by doing this one thing. And that one thing that I want to recommend is to learn the business that you're in. And I know people can say, it's going to take time, it's going to take effort, and I've already got a list of 10 things to do in a day, but try and structure this into your day. What I find, even from a recruitment perspective, when I'm dealing with HR managers, they often have to create a meeting with line for better understanding of a role. They often do the initial meeting, and then I'm dealing with line management throughout the process for the spec. I think that you gain credibility with the exec team or in the company, or you gain confidence when you understand the business that you're in. So my suggestion 100%. Is to take the initiative to learn the products, the services, the processes, right down to production, to understand each job function, especially when you're in technical environments, because you pick up a lot just by learning about the environment and the business that you're in. It also shows the exec team that you've got an interest in the business. And when you're seen on the shop floor, when you're engaging with the managers, you get the inside scoop in terms of everything that's happening, and you gain credibility with the actual line managers, but also with the exec team as well. I don't always think it helps us to sit in our offices and hear and have this reactive approach where we have to constantly problem solve because we're not immersed into the business. HR can be one of two things, transactional or transformational. It's up to us to decide. And it's not that you have to leave all of your work and every day be immersed into the business, but take time every day, or take time once a week to connect with line, to understand a process in the business, to join meetings when managers are meeting to discuss issues in their departments. I worked for a fashion house for a couple of years when I was in HR, and I made a point of learning every single job function, what the critical skills are, what the top talent in the company is. And I got to a point where the director would never make a hiring decision without my input, because I understood the job function so well. And the only way to understand that is to be immersed and to learn the business. So I think just from a starting point, that's something that I'd really like to recommend. We've got to realize that directors and business owners are concerned about outcomes. They're concerned about profit. They're concerned about the bottom line. And sometimes we can take offense, about that because we're concerned about the people aspect, but there's a place for everything. And I think we've got to also understand how can we shift their thinking? And my advice is start reporting more on impact, less activity, but more impact. So as an example, instead of saying we filled 8 roles this month, we've reduced time to fill by 22%. There's been obviously, which has increased productivity or prevented more revenue loss. It's very much about how you say something, because it needs to count towards the bottom line. So, positioning yourself as an expert is important. And the way to do that is to tell them how your position and what you do in HR benefits the company. I often find that HR managers that are knowledgeable about trends, about unemployment rates, about the scarce skills in the industry, in the country, in the company, have a lot more credibility with the management teams that they have to work with. I think you've always got to start to think about cost saving, even though it might be the financial manager's responsibility. If you tie yourself to every function in the business by just thinking that way, that's how we gain credibility, with the management team as well. And the last thing I just want to say about this is, we often have an opportunity in board meetings or in exec meetings to have a slot where we speak about anything to do with HR. And this is your opportunity to shine. This is your opportunity to add value and to let management know how much of value what you do brings to the company. Because the way I see it, even in our business, the chairs, tables, laptops mean nothing if our people are not here. People are the biggest asset. They also are the biggest headache sometimes. Hence, lots of managers have lots of gray hair and lots of HR people have lots of gray hair. But realistically, our businesses mean nothing without people. So trying to shift their mindset is important. And it starts with such simple things. It starts even before we get to the high level stuff, like presenting yourself well. I think we've got to get into a space where when we're going to a board meeting or when we are meeting with the director, we present the best version of ourselves, regardless of how we feel, what we're dealing with, what the issues and challenges are in our lives and in the company. Dress well, bring good energy, bring positive energy. I often say it's not about what a new dress looks like for anybody else or a new suit looks like for anybody else, but it's about how it makes you feel in the situation that you're in. And I think when directors start to see you not behave like an employee, but behave like a stakeholder in the company, you start to gain that respect from them as well. One of the things that I find that HR managers sometimes forget, or executive directors forget, is that HR is an ambassador for the company. Because when talent is walking into your organization, you are the first point of contact. You are telling them about the company, about the culture, about the expansion plans, about everything, the processes, the products, all of that. So I think from that point, it's important to make management understand that your role is key to bringing top talent into the company. So you do need to be included in discussions regarding growth and structure or restructure, expansion, etc., because you take that information when you're trying to attract talent for the company as well. So those are just a few of the practical things that I wanted to start off with. And Mel, I'm going to hand back to you. I hope this helps in some way. There's a few more things to share, but I will share a bit later on in the presentation.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Rose. Absolutely. I was a broken record. Discipline is a line management function. Discipline is a line management function. I'm not there to discipline your staff. I'll support you. I'll help you. I'll provide the infrastructure, but they're not my staff. They're yours. And yeah, the credibility. Absolutely. Rose, that's a beautiful segue into the third piece that I wanted to share with you about. So we've looked at the structural authority that we need to have in the business. We've looked at some of the inner work we need to do. And then my favorite author, if you know him, you'll know where this is from. John Maxwell. I've got about 10 of his books behind me right there. Leadership is influence. And he says, if you turn around and nobody's following you, you're just taking a walk. So you can have the clarity of your mandate. You can have your peers that you can go to for your safe space. You can have been doing your inner work of building up your resilience, and you're able to handle, you're dealing with your self-doubt. But if you turn around and the business isn't seeing you as the lead, as the HR lead in the business, you're just taking a walk. So these are some of the lessons I learned, mainly the hard way. So it's do as I say, not as I do, not as I've done. But hopefully this helps you. This is about credibility in the business. Not HR, you, Taryn, Kirsty, your credibility as a person at the table, so that when you speak up, as Rosa said, speak up. You're not talking to fill space. You're not talking for talking's sake. You want to be taken seriously. How much should you talk? What should you talk about? How little should you say? That's where the rubber hits the road, and that determines how much people are listening when you talk. So first of all, choose the hills you're prepared to die on. Pick your battles. Sometimes you sit in here thinking, oh my gosh, that supervisor there is a problem. We've got a retention issue in that department. You can see all the issues, and we're passionate about it, and so we're vocal about it. And if we are vocal about too many issues, people tune out and we're just a nag. So pick the hills you're prepared to die on, prioritize your battles, and focus one at a time or a couple at a time. And then secondly, align your HR strategy with the business goals. Sometimes we get our HR diploma, we read a fantastic article on LinkedIn, and we want to go and say to the business, this is the way you've got to do it. This is what we've got to do. And while we're asking the business to serve us by clarifying our mandate and sharing the same expectations with us, what the business needs from us is to look first to the business. First, look at what is the business strategy. So to share with us, what is the strategy? What are the goals? Where's the business heading? And how can I, as HR, build a strategy that supports that? So a big part of credibility comes from the ability to tune into what's happening with the business and to align what we are doing and to align what you want to achieve in HR with the business's objectives. So we need to know how to calculate and communicate ROI, make things about numbers. It definitely builds credibility. As Rose said, using your data analytic, bring the facts to the table, bring evidence so we don't sound too fluffy and woohoo. And then linked to the aligning your strategy, align your verbiage with what the business understands. Sometimes I notice HR people you want to educate the business so much and you want to bring them into your HR space. And we will achieve a lot more influence if we adapt our speak sometimes so that the business relates to what we're trying to say. And that comes through, if I just skip down to the next pink line, they implement regular checkers with stakeholders. How do you know what the business will relate to? It's through checking in, it's through conversations, not HR conversations about what's happening on the floor, conversations about challenges they're experiencing with suppliers. Understand, as Rose said, I won't harp on the topic more, understand the business, have key conversations with people across all levels of the organization. It enables you to tailor your language and even examples that you're going to use when you're trying to make your point, you're going to draw from their real day-to-day problems, and you don't seem like this isolated person that sits in their office all day that isn't in touch with the business. It's critical to building your influence and your credibility. And going back up, be consistent, be disciplined, be restrained, be visible. Be consistent and disciplined is quite self-explanatory. The restrained in your passion, in your concern, in your excitement. We don't want to overwhelm people with all the emotions that we're feeling. So we're restrained, we're factual, we're using our data analytics, and we communicating in a professional manner, in a manner that the business is going to relate to, and be visible. As Rose says, not at your desk. I know there's so much admin. I know you're looking at everything you've got to do. You don't have time to walk around the factory floor or to walk around the office. But we have to see that that's absolutely priority. We've got to block off time and make ourselves visible in the business, not just so that they see us out of our offices, but so that we can have those conversations, those check-in conversations, and really be in touch with what's happening in the business. And then know the personalities that you're dealing with. If you know a psychometric tool, you can apply it accordingly, but know if you're talking to somebody who just wants a bottom line, and keep it short. They want the short version. Don't drown them in all your facts because you've got them. You're going to lose them. At the same time, if you've got somebody who needs the data, that's more nitpicky, analytical type, don't go to them without being armed with the evidence and the data to support what you're saying. So know the personalities you're dealing with, adjust your message accordingly, know the business, speak to their context and speak to their pain points, and then prioritize your projects in accordance with all of the above. And you'll find yourself having far more relevance, far more influence, be approached more by business if that's something that you are struggling with, and you will know from that feedback that you are hitting the mark, and it'll help you to deal with your imposter syndrome. So, bringing the plane in for landing, guys. This approach has been a holistic one. So we've started off with establishing some external factors, clarifying your mandate, clarifying expectations, establishing structural clarity, establishing the support systems that you need from peers, subject matter experts, mentors, and making sure that you have sight of the business objectives so that you can adjust your HR strategy accordingly. Secondly was the inner work, developing, constantly developing our competence, constantly developing our subject matter knowledge and our skills, building a habit of reframing things. If you're in a habit of seeing things negative, reframing it to the positive, that growth mindset, and practicing radical acceptance. We're not going to change everything. And then finally, lead through your influence. Yeah, I think that is just about me before we go to some Q&A. Rose, before we carry on, you wanted to add something?
I think you've summed it up quite nicely, Mel. But if I can just give the last few points that I've just prepared on these topics, just to boost confidence when it comes to being in HR. I think we also need to be aware of how we speak and how we come across, in terms of, instead of asking questions, start becoming confident to make recommendations. And again, it goes back to learning and knowing the business. When you speak from a point of knowledge, you are able to make recommendations that will be taken seriously or will be taken into account in decision making. Remember, confidence is heard before it's felt. So I think we need to start speaking with a bit more confidence and not shrieking when we're trying to help make a high level decision. The other thing that I find, and I have this problem, I'm an over explainer. Like, I've had to learn that sometimes you've got to just say your point and the silence needs to speak the rest. So short sentences, clear points, silence after speaking. I think we need to remember that senior leaders respect clarity and not the amount of speaking or the volume of what we're saying. So it's important for us to start speaking with confidence, but also just stop over explaining. The one thing I've learned in HR is that relationships form outside the boardroom. Before we can start being influential in board meetings and earning our seat at the table, we've got to know our audience. It's something you've mentioned as well, Mel. And there's so many tools now to get to know the people around you. People can sometimes be close, but there's LinkedIn, there's Facebook. Like, find out what their interests are. You might have a kid going to the same school, or they might be doing surfing, and that's something that you know a bit about. I don't know, whatever that might be. Relationships are everything. I even find that in recruitment, the most successful placements we make or the most successful hires with our clients are when we've forged good relationships with those clients. We understand their business. More importantly, we understand the client, who is you most of the time, is the HR person. So we would make an effort to understand you better. And it's the same thing that you should be doing with your exec team. I don't think anyone's superior to anyone anymore. We all are just people. We all have the same vested interest in the companies that we work in. So I don't think we should put anyone on a platform where we don't ever speak to them. So I think it's important to make sure you do a check-in with your director, have a monthly HR meeting, or some people do it weekly or quarterly, but that check-in is important to build a good relationship, to build that rapport with the exec team. But it starts from building relationships outside the boardroom. And I think often we forget we carrying a lot. HR carries a lot, and but we also forget what the directors or what the exec team or what the owners of a business are carrying. And when you sit in that type of chair, I often say my team doesn't know what I've got to carry managing the entire company or the team or running the business, but um, and they still expect a lot out of me. But I think we've got to sometimes put ourselves in their shoes and understand that they're also carrying a lot. So understanding their pain points and just being an advisory ear or somebody that they can talk to and they can confide in, it really, really builds credibility in the relationship. I often find that HR is known as the complaints department, and I'll often say that because I was in that type of situation. But I think we need to move from being nice HR or on the side of the employee or on the side of the company, however everyone's viewing us, into becoming strategic HR and into doing what's the right thing and not what's right for the company or the employee, just what's right. People are everything, and directors don't always see that, but it's our job as HR to remind them, because if you can fix the people problem, you fix half of your problems. And like often they don't understand the importance of staff morale, of culture, of team building, of top talent. Those are things they're not really interested in knowing a lot about. Obviously, we've got to be concise, but we've got to start changing that mindset and making them understand that morale is everything. I interview candidates on a daily basis, and 90% of them, 95% of them want to leave because it's a toxic work environment. They've got a micromanager, they've got a horrible culture, they don't have structures or systems in place, which all speaks to culture, it all speaks to morale. So helping the management team to understand that will just ensure that people are retained, top talent is attracted to the company. And sometimes you need to use stats to be able to do that. But it is important for us to drive that, because I think everyone would know as HR, if you have a high staff turnover, that makes your job really, really difficult. You might as well invest in retention of staff than be constantly hiring, constantly interviewing, and the cost of that and all that it demands when new people start and leave. It takes a toll on HR. So I think it is important for us to pay attention to these things and to be the drivers of these. The other thing I find with HR practitioners, myself included, is we often take a lot of things very personally. I think if I can be brave to say, sometimes it's not even about us. Sometimes a no doesn't have anything to do with you, or sometimes if your idea wasn't taken into account or you're not getting heard on certain things, like Mel said, we've got to pick our battles and we've got to know when to move on. But I think where we sometimes can go wrong is we hold a grudge. And then it becomes, oh, well, this is just a job, or I'm not interested because whatever I say, they never want to take it into account. I think we've got to stop putting everything into one box, and we've got to understand that there'll be some wins and there'll be some ideas, or there'll be some policies that we want to implement that management's not interested in. Let's just move on from that. Again, I'm just making your directors understand the talent war that's out there is very, very important, because I find all day, every day, companies are poaching from each other, and there's this talent war that's going on. And on top of that, candidates now become in a position where they can demand things because their skills are scarce. So I think it is important for us to make them aware of these types of things as well. Physically, it's important even in a meeting. Again, everything is about presentation, it's about impression, it's about perspective. And sitting at the table, sitting upright at the table, not shrinking, making eye contact, and speaking early in the meeting is important, because if you're going to stay silent for too long, it becomes harder to enter the conversation. So try and speak within the first 10 minutes of any board meeting that you're sitting in. Often we, as HR practitioners, HR managers, we don't want to talk about the failures or something that didn't work out that we implemented. But I think it's important to do that. I think it's important to acknowledge when something didn't work, what the lessons were, and what our desired outcomes are that we haven't obtained from putting something into place. So let's start normalizing that. Another big challenge that I find with HR practitioners is line management. I hope there's no line managers on this in this meeting, but nevertheless, even if they are, often because line managers have been promoted from the bottom up, they lack management training, or they've never given management training. And I think if we can educate them, if we can upskill them, if we can get them trained, it makes our lives a lot easier so that every situation doesn't have to come through to us. So I think it's important for us to invest in training, and not training for the sake of training, but training that's going to have the desired outcome where they become better at managing their staff, which brings less issues to HR. So that's the objective. So even when you're looking for service providers that provide this type of training, don't want to pay less. You get what you pay for. So try and look for good management training. And then as you're learning about what's happening and the common scenarios and common problems you're dealing with, create a playbook for managers, do's and don'ts for common people scenarios, or a channel for managers to ask questions or get sort of guidance, so that again, all of this makes life a little bit easier for you. The other thing is, and as recruiters, this is something we constantly do. I'm just about to go to a conference in Cape Town in the beginning of March. And there's not a lot of training for recruiters, but this is one of them. But get trained, like upskill yourself, go to HR workshops, go to HR training, and find training that you can do. There's always more to learn. And sometimes that provides a nice challenge sometimes in a job that can feel mundane or repetitive or whatever the case may be. It also helps you to stay abreast of trends in the HR world, in the industry, that sort of thing. Again, as Mel said, and I'm not going to talk too much about this, but you've got to have a trusted network. You've got to have other HR. We've got a recruitment network where we meet with other recruiters. It's actually more of a vent session, but we all venting about all the issues we have and what works and what hasn't been working. It's such an amazing support structure. Mel is going to touch a little bit about that as we conclude now, but it is important, for you to have that support amongst other HR professionals. And then the last thing that I just want to say, just from a point of positivity, is it's so important for you to be intentional about celebrating and making and bringing to attention wins. So when something's worked well, if you've implemented a project, like Mel said, consistency is key. Sometimes we implement something and then we let it go because we're busy with other things. Be consistent. But when you've implemented something and it's worked well, make a point of sharing that. Make a point of celebrating that win. Sometimes there's not a lot of positivity in HR because you're dealing with so many people issues at the same time, so many challenges. So just like us, when we make a placement at Pro Talent, we ring the bell, everybody cheers the person on because we know how hard it is to make that placement. Have some sort of mechanism where you do share the wins, whether it's in the exec meetings, whether it's in, when everyone comes together in the company and announcements are being made on a monthly, quarterly basis, whatever the case may be, celebrating wins is important. It keeps that, that positivity and that morale in the company and for yourself as well, because again, internally is where our biggest challenges happen. And I think it is important to make sure that there is positivity in what we do as well. That's me, Mel.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Rose. Sure, you packed a lot of nuggets into that. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think a lot of the answer to that, and I think it was Carl in the chat said HR is a buffer between employees and employers. We've got to learn the art of leading with authority, so that our positioning in HR as an authority is that we stand alone. It's not about sides. We are an authority and an influencer, and that's a competence. And it requires EQ, and it's a journey for some of us to really hone in on that. Some people naturally carry it, and that's awesome. Something I've had to work on through my career. So thank you. So some of you might be wanting to carry on the conversation. So I'm going to tell you about a couple of Waymakers offerings. This is where I get to do that. So I am going to be holding a workshop that's more reflective. So it's far more interactive, and taking the framework that we've looked at today and how do I make this practical? How do I apply this? Then I'm this has been a long time in the making. The Waymakers HR for HR community. We are just launching it. We have just launched this. And this is an online community space for HR practitioners There are hubs where you can go and have chats around specific subjects, whether it's IR or training or sourcing, or employment equity, whatever. We've got hubs for very specific conversations. There will be webinars, there will be group coaching, there will be safe spaces to meet the needs that we've been reflecting on here this morning. So just a space to feel that you're not alone and to achieve training and even share resources. So that's the Waymakers HR for HR community. And then if you really want to take this learning and into a journey, the Waymakers HR Authority Lab is a 12-week journey. It's a closed cohort, ideally 6, maximum 8 people across a 12-week journey. We'll meet every couple of weeks online and run through a program of really making the internal shift from doubt to carrying authority, as well as looking practically at the practical application of how do I create the structural authority? What conversations do I need to have? How do I go about this? So I'm really excited about those offerings. And so after this, we're going to send out a PDF summary of all the info, as well as a link to a form, a Google form. And if you'd like more information about any of these, you tick the box, provide your contacts, and I'll send you the relevant information. And that is us. Before we do the lucky draw, I think we're going to open for questions. So, Rose?
Yeah, I think if there's any questions, I mean, we are out of time, but if there's 1 or 2 questions we can take, then we'll definitely do that. And I also think that we're going to share our contact information. That would be the last slide. So if there's anything that you'd like to email us, just to answer, or you'd want to connect with us in any way, you're welcome to do that as well. But if there are any questions, we'll just sort of allocate 5 minutes to do that. Okay, while the questions are being popped into the chat box, we're going to quickly do the lucky draw. So what I've done is I've put everyone's names into the randomizer, and then I'm just going to let it randomly pick a name. And then if you are on this call, then you can just let me know, just maybe do a wave or whatever the case may be. And then we're going to obviously connect with you to either get the book delivered, or Mel will connect with you to do the 90-minute coaching session. So the first prize is a book from my director. I don't know if you guys can see, but she's written 3 books. So you're going to have the choice of either the Unstoppable one, which is quite a popular one for business. And then the second one is How Does She Do It? And the latest one is The Weight of Hope. This is more a book on NPOs and running an NPO that she wrote. So there's a choice of 1 of 3. So I'm just going to quickly let the randomizer choose one person, and then I'll tell you who that is. 1 second. Santa Harding. Hope I'm saying it right. Santa, are you here?
Yes.
Okay, great. So you get the choice of one of the books.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
No problem. My administrator will be in touch with you, and we'll get it couriered to you. And then the next one is a 90-minute coaching session with Mel. That's the next prize. I'm just going to let it sort of choose a person. Just 1 second for me. Tracy Gand.
Yay, that's me. I'm very excited.
Great, Tracy. So yes, Mel will be connecting with you to do a 90-minute coaching session with you. This is a great prize. So well done to you. And I hope that you find lots and lots of value in this. Okay, great. Thanks, guys, for staying on the call and for listening to us. Again, either one of us are happy to connect with any one of you if you have any questions, or if you, Mel is going to be sending out the actual presentation, which will get sent through our administrator. And then, yeah, if there's any questions from there, you'll have our contact details. Mel, do you just want to share our contact details as the last slide?
Yes,
Okay,
yes. So, and I'm seeing some questions coming through. So I don't know if you want to.
Okay.
Yeah. So here we go. Our contact information.
Okay, Mel, do you want to tackle the first question?
Yes. Okay. So the question was, what one behavior can an HR professional start doing tomorrow to become more influential? Sure, Rose. I don't know what your thoughts are, but if I had to choose one thing, and if you're not doing it, from my point of view, it would be to walk the floor, have conversations, get to know people, chat to them about their roles. What are their challenges? How long have you been doing this? What do you like about your job? What don't you like? Depending on the level, and just get to know the business, get to know the people, and yeah, what their challenges are.
Yeah, I think I can just add to that. So again, like we obviously all can't implement everything in one day. So choose one thing, master it before you get to the next. I think already everyone's doing an amazing job if you're staying in the job of HR. I often say in recruitment that we don't get a lot of HR officer or HR manager job specs that come in, which tells me that maybe we suckers for punishment. I don't know what it is, but HR people usually stay where they are for long periods of time. So what we can do better is to learn the business. When you learn the business, again, it sometimes can solve half the problems. Number one, it builds your credibility with the management team. It builds good relationships with the line. And by understanding and having knowledge of the business, not every problem would require massive investigation into solving. Because you understand the business, some answers become like quite quick. But I think the biggest thing that I've seen is the struggle within yourself, which is what Mel touched a lot on. Like, work on you, work on building your own confidence, work on, like I often say that our longest relationships is with ourselves. And when we build our own confidence, we become better, or we present better to the people around us. So start working on you. And again, I've used simple examples of just power dress, or show up into in a meeting well prepared. Like make sure you're coming and adding value, that sort of thing. But just the way you present yourself is important. But that stems from the work you do within yourself, which is to build your confidence and to shift your mindset and to have an HR community that you can delve into when you're needing support, that sort of thing. I hope that helps in some ways.
Absolutely. Yeah. I would really say get out of the silo, if that applies. Get out of your silo, away from your desk, in touch with the people. And then there's one more question, and this one's a bit trickier. How do we change the narrative in an organization where it is deemed that HR is the driver of company culture, but department managers take no ownership in this regard? And this is a common problem. It's like managers that want HR to discipline their staff, to have all the difficult conversations. You do it. Culture, that's tricky. You do it. And so, yeah, Rose, do you have any initial thoughts on that?
I do have a few thoughts on that, because again, I deal with line in the role of recruitment now, and I've dealt with line in the role of an HR manager. And again, it's education, education, education. We've got to educate them on the impact of them getting involved, the impact of culture, the impact of tackling, the difficult conversations. Like I often feel like being nice as line or HR is going to avoid the hard conversations, the tough conversations. And we can do everything respectfully, but sometimes it requires tough conversations. So equipping them on how to manage, how to lead, how to have difficult conversations, how to mentor sort of takes some of the responsibility away
because if anyone else has any input on that. But I would say that is a change management issue, and it does require education. I agree absolutely with what Rose is saying.
Yes. Okay, I think if that's all the questions, then thank you all for joining us. Thank you for staying to the end. And we really, really appreciate the support. Again, our contact details are there. Reach out to us. Mel for any type of HR support and coaching. Myself for any hiring needs that you may have. Lots of you that are here are our clients already. But if you want to reach out to us for assistance in recruitment, you're welcome to do so. And again, thanks for joining us. Have a great day ahead. Remember, you are amazing already. Just implement one or two more things to make you even more amazing.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
Rose.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Bye
Bye.
now. And Tracy, I'll be in touch.
Thank you so much.
Okey
Thanks very
dokes.
much. Bye. Bye.